Part 1. I didn't know I was falling in love with my business partner. But other people did. A client once stopped mid-sentence, looking between Mara and I, with a knowing smile. "Sorry," he said. "You two are just so much in sync." I thought he meant work. He didn't. We laughed it off. But after that, I began catching it everywhere. The way staff would look at us during presentations, not confused, not impressed, just watching. The way people went quiet when we stood too close to the same screen. The way someone would hesitate before interrupting us, like they were stepping into something already in progress. I told myself it was because we'd worked together for 5 years. That's what happens when two people build a firm from nothing. You learn each other's rhythms. You anticipate. You adjust. You become efficient. You do not become aware of how often your eyes find the same person in a room full of others. You do not notice how naturally your body angles toward theirs when you're thinking. You do not notice how easily conversations stretch past work when everyone else has gone home. Until the night something forces you to. The Kavner email came in at 9:02 p.m. We had both stayed late, pretending to finish paperwork neither of us was reading, waiting for an answer we were already bracing ourselves not to get. My phone buzzed. Across the room, Mara's did too. I saw her glance down at the same time I did. We read it. We looked up. And for half a second, neither of us moved. For months. 3 rejected proposals. 2 very close meetings. And now, the email began with, "We're pleased to inform you." My chair hit the glass wall behind me as I stood. Mara was already walking toward me. Not smiling. Not laughing. Just moving fast, like relief had hit her square in the chest. I met her halfway. The hug wasn't a decision. It was impact. For months of pressure leaving our bodies at the same time. My arms went around her without thinking. Her hands came to my back, firm, grateful, grounding. I felt her exhale against my shoulder like she had been holding that breath for weeks. It was the kind of hug colleagues share when something has almost broken them. It should have lasted a second. It didn't. Because after the relief faded, neither of us stepped away. And in the quiet that followed, something unfamiliar slid into the space where celebration had been. Her hand was still on my back. Not moving. Not tightening. Just there. My cheek was still against her shoulder. I could feel the slow rhythm of her breathing. The warmth of her through the thin fabric of my blouse. I became aware of how close our faces were. Not touching. Close enough that if either of us turned slightly, it would stop being a hug. And start being something else. I waited for her to let go. She didn't. Then I realized. I wasn't letting go either. The office was silent enough that I heard the air conditioner click on overhead. That's when we both stepped back. Carefully. In sync. Like we had silently agreed something had gone a fraction too far. Mara cleared her throat. I tucked my hair behind my ear, even though it wasn't in my face. We didn't joke about it. We didn't pretend it hadn't happened. We said goodnight like people handling something fragile. I didn't sleep that night. Quick pause. This story is supported by something I actually use. When I listen to stories like this, I want the sound to stay soft, clear, but not intrusive. A good Bluetooth speaker makes a difference. The one I use fills the room evenly, keeps voices warm, and doesn't flatten the quiet moments. Whether it's late at night, early morning, or somewhere unfamiliar, it simply holds the atmosphere. If you're looking for a speaker that lets stories breathe, I've linked it below. Alright. Back to our story. At 8:12 the next morning, I was in her office. She was already seated, laptop open, tea to her right, expression calm in the way it gets when she has already made a decision. "We should talk about last night," she said. Yes. There was no pretending. "What happened wasn't appropriate," she continued. Not because it was intentional, but because it wasn't. That was the problem. It had been effortless. If we crossed that line, it wouldn't stay private. Staff would notice. Clients would notice. Competitors would notice. Every success we had built would start to look questionable in hindsight. 5 years of credibility could blur overnight. "We can't let that happen," I said. "We won't." She pulled a notepad toward her. And we did what we always do when something feels unstable. We made rules. No closed-door meetings unless necessary. No texting after work hours. No personal conversations when working late. No physical familiarity beyond what professionalism requires. No references to the hug. No blurred lines. She wrote them down carefully. It didn't feel like punishment. It felt like discipline. Like we were containing something before it became dangerous. I left her office relieved. Certain. Proud, even. We had identified a risk and handled it. For a week, the pact worked. Until Thursday's strategy meeting. I was at the screen presenting projections. Mara sat at the far end of the table, pen resting against her notebook. I finished outlining a risk scenario and looked up at her. She nodded once. Then she smiled. It wasn't new. That was the problem. It was the same quiet, approving smile she had given me for years. The one that used to pass between us unnoticed. But now, I felt it land under my skin. Felt my awareness rush toward it before I could stop myself. My mind went blank mid-sentence. I had to glance at my notes for a word I didn't need. The meeting continued. No one noticed. But I felt that smile for the rest of the day. In the elevator. At my desk. While brushing my teeth that night. That's when I understood the flaw in our plan. The pact had accounted for actions. It had not accounted for recognition. Or memory. Or the way my body already knew her before my mind had decided it shouldn't. Part 2. The pact didn't break in a single moment. It frayed in seconds no one else would notice. I realized it during a client strategy session. I was at the front of the room, walking the team and the client through revised projections when the slide froze mid-transition. The numbers hung half-loaded on the screen behind me. I clicked the remote again. Nothing. I kept speaking, trying to buy time. If you look at the third quarter trend, Mara was already on her feet. She crossed the room without a word, heels sharp against the tile, and stepped into my space to reach for the laptop on the podium. She didn't ask me to move. She just fit herself into the gap beside me like she'd done it 100 times before. I could feel the line of her arm near my waist as she worked the trackpad. Close enough that if I shifted an inch, we would touch. Go on, she murmured quietly, eyes on the screen. I realized I had stopped talking. The client was watching us. The team was watching us. I forced my voice to resume, but my mind had narrowed to the awareness of her beside me. The warmth of her. The steadiness of her breathing. The way she didn't seem to notice how close she was standing. The slide flicked forward. She stepped back. Sorry, she said smoothly to the room, as if nothing at all had happened. But my pulse took a long time to come down. Later that afternoon, we were reviewing numbers with the operations team crowded around my desk. There weren't enough chairs. People stood behind us, leaning in to see the screen. Mara came to stand at my side, one hand braced on the back of my chair as she leaned over to follow the figures. I tried to keep my voice even as I explained the breakdown. But her arm formed a quiet barrier beside me. Her sleeve close enough that I was aware of every small shift she made while reading. When someone asked a question, she leaned closer to see the spreadsheet. I could feel the warmth of her through the thin fabric of my blouse. Neither of us moved away. There was nowhere to move to. I answered the question a second too late. Thursday finance meeting. I was seated this time, laptop open, walking everyone through cost adjustments when Mara interrupted. Show them the previous model, she said. She didn't wait for me to turn the screen. She reached across me for the keyboard. Her hand landed beside mine. Her shoulder angled in front of me as she navigated the file herself. I had to lean back in my chair to give her room. From the outside, it looked efficient, collaborative, seamless. From where I sat, it felt like being quietly displaced from my own space. Elena was the one who caught this discrepancy, Mara added to the room, still focused on the screen. I swallowed, aware of how close her voice was to my ear. Everyone nodded, looking at the numbers. No one noticed that I had gone completely still. By Friday, I understood the problem. The pact had accounted for distance. It had not accounted for how often our jobs required us to stand side by side, speak over each other, reach across each other, and perform as a unit in front of other people. And every time we did, my concentration splintered in places I could not afford to let it. Part 3. The office was quieter than usual, but not empty. A few lights were still on across the floor. Someone in accounts was finishing up. The low hum of printers carried faintly through the corridor. I was at my desk finishing revisions for the morning presentation when Mara's heels approached. I knew the rhythm before I saw her. She stopped at my door, then knocked once on the frame, a formality we had started observing after the pact. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. Her voice was professional. Even. "Yes," I said, turning my screen slightly so she could see it. An old habit. An old rhythm. She stepped inside and came to stand beside my chair instead of across from me. Close enough to read the numbers on my screen. Close enough that I could feel her presence before she spoke again. "Walk me through this slide," she said. I did. My voice steady. My hand on the trackpad. Her shoulder just behind mine as she leaned slightly to follow the data. We had stood like this hundreds of times before. That was the problem. I could feel how easily my body recognized the arrangement. How natural it felt for her to be there. "You've been distant," she said quietly, eyes still on the screen. My hand stilled on the trackpad. "I've been focused," I replied. She didn't argue. Didn't move away. "I heard you started seeing someone." The words landed gently. "Precisely." I nodded once. "I did." She shifted her weight slightly, bracing a hand on the edge of my desk to lean closer to the screen. There was no need for her to be that close anymore. She could see the numbers perfectly well. "Is it serious?" she asked. I swallowed. "No." Silence stretched, but not awkwardly. Just full. The accounts printer whirred somewhere in the distance. "It was supposed to help," I said, still looking at the screen. "I thought if I redirected things, this would get easier." Mara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached past me for the mouse. Her hand landed on the desk beside mine. She didn't touch me, but she didn't avoid it either. "And?" she asked. "It didn't," I admitted. Now she looked at me. Not a glance. Not a quick check. She turned her head fully and looked at me the way she used to before the pact openly. Without caution. My chest tightened. "I kept waiting to feel something I don't have to try to feel when I'm standing next to you," I said. Her fingers flexed slightly against the desk. "That's not fair," she said quietly. "I know." She exhaled through her nose, a sound halfway between a laugh and something else. "You think I haven't noticed?" she asked. My heart stuttered. She gestured faintly between us. "How careful we've been. How unnatural it's become. How much effort it takes to stand beside you and pretend I don't feel it." The air shifted. Not dramatic. Just honest. I turned in my chair to face her fully. Now we were close for no reason at all. No screen. No numbers. No meeting. No audience. Just us. "I don't want to do it anymore," I said. Her gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then back to my eyes. Neither of us moved. "Neither do I," she said. Her hand slid the smallest distance across the desk. This time, it touched mine. Not by accident. Not in passing. Deliberately. I didn't pull away. I covered her hand with mine. The contact was steady. Warm. Certain. Her expression changed, the careful professionalism dissolving into something softer, familiar, almost relieved. She stepped closer. I stood. We didn't rush. We didn't speak. We just closed the last inches between us like it had been pending for months. My forehead rested lightly against hers. Her breath warmed my cheek. "Finally," she murmured. And for the first time since the pact began, there was nothing left to resist.
Hi ladies. Thanks for sticking around till the end. I'm just one African storyteller, sharing love stories the world told us to hide. Please subscribe and help keep these voices alive, one story at a time.